Hello there, and welcome to Soft History. Close your eyes for a moment. Let your breathing slow. Let the world around you fade into softness. Now imagine darkness, not the darkness of night, not the darkness of a closed room, but the darkness of 2.5 miles beneath the surface of the Atlantic Ocean. A darkness so complete, so absolute that light has not touched it in over a century. A darkness where the water is cold enough to stop time itself, where the pressure is so immense it could crush steel, where silence reigns with the weight that presses down like the hand of eternity. And in that darkness, resting on the ocean floor among fields of sediment and scattered debris, lies the skeletal remains of what was once the most magnificent ship the world had ever seen. The Titanic! Her grand staircase, once bathed in golden light from a glass dome above, now stands in perpetual shadow, its carved oak balustrades draped in rust and decay. Her corridors, which once echoed with laughter and the soft shuffle of elegant footsteps, are silent now, filled only with the slow cold current of deep-sea water. The carpets that cushioned 1,000 journeys have long since dissolved into memory, their patterns and colours claimed by bacteria and time. The crystal chandeliers that sparkled above elegant dinners have fallen, their glass scattered across floors that no longer exist. The music that once drifted through her lounges has been replaced by the voiceless song of the abyss. And yet, if you listen closely, if you allow your mind to drift backward through the currents of time, through the decades and the years, through the layers of memory and history, you can still hear her. The distant note of a violin playing a waltz in 3/4 time, the soft murmur of conversation in 6 languages, the gentle hiss of steam moving through copper pipes, the rhythmic pulse of engines turning, propellers spinning, a city of steel moving across an endless ocean. Tonight, we are not visiting a wreck. We are not diving into tragedy. We are visiting a memory. We are stepping back through the veil of history, through the mists of time to April 1912, when the Titanic was alive, when her engines hummed with purpose and power, when her decks glowed beneath hundreds of electric lights, when every room, every corridor, every hidden soul and space held a story waiting to unfold. We are going to walk through her, deck by deck, room by room, corridor by corridor, from the highest point where officers scanned the horizon to the deepest depths where firemen shoveled coal into roaring furnaces. We will descend from the open sky of the boat deck, where fresh Atlantic breezes swept across polished wood, down through layers of society and machinery, down into the fiery depths where the ship's heart beat with steam and flame. We will trace the paths of millionaires and immigrants, officers and coal trimmers, stewards and stokers, musicians and mail clerks. We will explore the grand and the hidden, the luxurious and the laborious, the celebrated and the forgotten, the spaces designed to impress, and the spaces never meant to be seen. This is not a story of disaster. This is not a tale of tragedy. This is a story of a ship, a floating world built by human hands, filled with human dreams and powered by human labour. Before she became a legend, before she became a cautionary tale, before her name became synonymous with hubris and loss, she was simply this, a place where people lived, worked, laughed, slept, dreamed, and hoped. So take my hand, let go of the present. The water is warm now, the lamps are glowing, the brass fixtures gleam, the carpets are soft beneath your feet. The ship is waiting. Let us step aboard. Long before the Titanic ever touched water, long before her hull tasted salt or her engines turned for the first time, she existed as something else entirely, as lines on paper, as numbers in ledgers, as blueprints spread across drafting tables, as a vision shared between ambitious men in smoke-filled rooms where the future was being imagined into existence. In the city of Belfast, Ireland, where the River Lagan met the cold waters of the Irish Sea, the firm of Harland and Wolff had been tasked with creating something unprecedented, something that would surpass every vessel that had come before. The White Star Line wanted more than a ship. They wanted a statement. They wanted to dominate the transatlantic passenger trade, to compete with their rival Cunard Line, to prove that British engineering and craftsmanship could create floating palaces that combined speed, luxury, and safety in a way the world had never seen. The vision was grand, the execution would be even grander. Imagine the shipyard in those early days of construction, a forest of cranes and scaffolding rising against the grey Belfast sky like the skeleton of some mechanical leviathan. The clang of hammers on steel, echoing across the yard in an industrial symphony. The hiss and pop of riveting machines, driving white-hot rivets through steel plates. The shouts of foremen coordinating the movements of thousands of workers, their voices cutting through the noise like conductors directing an orchestra of chitta and muscle. The smell of coal smoke, hot metal, paint, and sweat hanging in the air like a physical presence. The Titanic was not built quickly. She was not built carelessly. She was built with the kind of obsessive attention to detail, the kind of meticulous craftsmanship that comes only when men believe they are creating something immortal, something that will outlive them, something that will carry their names into history. Her keel, the backbone of the ship, was laid on March 31st, 1909, in a ceremony that was both simple and profound. From that moment forward, she grew. Steel plates, each weighing several tons, were lifted into place by massive cranes and fastened with 3 million rivets, each one driven by hand and hammer until it was flush with the hull. Her frame rose higher and higher, level by level, deck by deck, until she towered over the shipyard like a steel cathedral, like a monument to human ambition. But it was not just her size that made her remarkable. It was her design. It was the thought that had gone into every detail, every system, every space. The Titanic was conceived as a floating city, a vertical society contained within a single hull, a self-sufficient world that could cross an ocean without ever touching land. Her architects understood that a transatlantic voyage was not merely a matter of transportation, not simply a question of moving people from one continent to another. It was a journey that lasted days, sometimes a week or more, and passengers needed more than a cabin and a dining room. They needed to live. They needed comfort and distraction and entertainment. They needed spaces that allowed them to forget, if only for a little while, that they were suspended above an ocean 3 miles deep, that beneath their feet was nothing but cold water and darkness. And so the ship was divided into decks, each with its own purpose, its own character, its own hidden world. The uppermost decks were open to the sky, designed for fresh air, open views, and the sense of freedom that comes from seeing the horizon stretch endlessly in all directions. Below that, the public rooms, dining saloons, lounges, smoking rooms, reading rooms, reception areas, places where passengers could gather, dine, socialize, and perform the rituals of class and culture. Below that, the staterooms and cabins, arranged in strict hierarchies according to class and wealth, from palatial suites with private promenades to cramped dormitory-style rooms shared by families of immigrants. And below that, deeper still, the machinery of the ship itself, engines, boilers, coal bunkers, storage rooms, crew quarters, galleys, workshops, the invisible infrastructure that kept the entire vessel alive and moving. The Titanic was not one ship. She was many ships, stacked atop one another like layers in a cake, each existing in its own separate reality, each telling its own story. By the spring of 1912, after 3 years of labour involving over 15,000 workers, she was ready. Her hull had been painted, black below the waterline, white above, with a red stripe along her boot topping. Her 4 towering funnels had been installed, rising over 60 feet above the boat deck, painted in the White Star Line's signature buff colour with black tops. Her furnishings had been installed with painstaking care. Carved wood panels, plush carpets, crystal chandeliers, leather chairs, silk curtains, brass fixtures polished to a mirror shine. Her machinery had been tested and retested. Engines, boilers, pumps, generators, all functioning in perfect harmony, and on the morning of April 10th, 1912, she sat docked at Southampton, England, her hull gleaming in the weak spring sunlight, her funnels reaching toward a pale blue sky, her decks bustling with activity as passengers, crew and cargo prepared for departure. Stewards hurried through corridors preparing cabins. Kitchen staff loaded provisions. Engineers made final checks on the machinery. On the pier, families said their goodbyes, some tearful, some excited. Luggage was loaded, steamer trunks by the hundreds, hat boxes, suitcases, parcels wrapped in brown paper. At noon, the gangways were raised. The mooring lines were cast off. The tugboats took hold of her hull, guiding her away from the pier. A deep, resonant blast from her whistles announced her departure, the sound rolling across Southampton water like the voice of a giant. And the Titanic, for the first and only time in her short life, set sail. Let us begin our tour where the officers began each day, at the very top of the ship, on the boat deck, where the sky opens wide and the air is fresh with salt and possibility. It is a calm morning. Imagine yourself standing here, feeling the gentle movement of the deck beneath your feet as the ship rolls ever so slightly with the rhythm of the sea. The sky above is pale and clear, stretching endlessly from horizon to horizon. A vast dome of blue broken only by a few thin wisps of cloud. A light breeze moves across the open deck, cool and refreshing, carrying with it the faint smell of salt water, coal smoke and fresh paint. The deck itself is wide and uncluttered, painted brilliant white, almost glowing in the morning light. Wooden benches and wicker deck chairs are arranged in neat rows along the railings, waiting for passengers who will come later to sit and read, to talk quietly, to watch the endless procession of waves. Above you, the 4 great funnels rise like columns holding up the sky itself, each one massive enough to drive a train through. Only 3 of them are functional, venting smoke and steam from the boilers below. The 4th is a dummy, added for aesthetic balance and to provide additional ventilation for the engine rooms. But together, they give the ship a sense of proportion and power that is impossible to ignore. They declare the Titanic's presence to anyone who sees her. I am large, I am powerful, I am the future. This is the realm of authority and responsibility. This is where the officers work, where decisions are made, where the ship is commanded and guided through the open sea. At the forward end of the boat deck stands the bridge, the nerve centre of the entire vessel, the brain from which all orders originate. It is an open platform, exposed to the elements, protected only by a low railing and a canvas windscreen that does little to stop the wind on rough days. From here, the ship's officers have an unobstructed view of the ocean ahead, a panoramic vista that extends for miles in every direction when the weather is clear. It is here that Captain Edward Smith stands during the day, his hands clasped behind his back, his white beard neatly trimmed, his uniform crisp and dark with gold braid on the sleeves. He is a man of calm authority, respected by his crew, trusted implicitly by the White Star Line. He has crossed the Atlantic more times than most men have crossed a street. He knows the sea in all its moods, calm and violent, generous and cruel. Behind the bridge, enclosed in a small cabin to protect the equipment from wind and spray, is the wheelhouse, where the ship's helmsmen stand at the massive wooden wheel, their hands gripping the polished spokes, turning it in response to orders called down from the officers on the bridge. The wheel itself is surprisingly modest given the size of the ship it controls, perhaps 4 feet in diameter, carved from rich mahogany and polished until it gleams. But the Titanic's steering is assisted by steam-powered machinery deep below in the steering engine room, converting the helmsman's movements into powerful hydraulic pressure that moves the massive rudder at the stern. The helmsman's job is more about precision and timing than raw strength. Adjacent to the wheelhouse is the chart room, a quiet, serious space that smells of ink, varnished wood, and old paper. Here, the ship's course is plotted and adjusted throughout the voyage. Officers gather around a large table covered with nautical charts, their fingers tracing routes across the North Atlantic, marking positions with pencil, noting weather conditions reported by other ships, calculating arrival times, adjusting for currents and wind. Compasses, sextants, chronometers, and other navigation instruments line the walls on polished wooden shelves. This is where science and seamanship meet, where centuries of maritime tradition combine with modern technology to guide the ship safely across 3,000 miles of open ocean. Just behind the chart room, in a space barely large enough for 2 men to stand comfortably, is the Marconi wireless cabin, the ship's link to the outside world. Inside this cramped room, 2 wireless operators, Jack Phillips and Harold Bride, sit at their equipment, surrounded by dials, switches, and the mysterious apparatus of early radio technology. They wear headsets clamped over their ears, and their fingers tap out messages in Morse code on brass telegraph keys, each tap sending invisible waves through the air, connecting the Titanic to other ships, to shore stations, to the wider world. The room hums with electrical energy, a high-pitched drone that never stops. In 1912, wireless communication is still a marvel, still new enough to seem almost magical. The Titanic is equipped with one of the most powerful transmitters afloat, capable of sending and receiving messages across hundreds of miles of empty ocean. Passengers pay to send personal messages to friends and family on shore. Greetings, reassurances, brief notes about the weather and the voyage. The crew receives navigational information, weather reports, and ice warnings from other ships travelling the same waters. Phillips and Bride work in shifts, but the workload is heavy, and often they work through what should be their rest periods. On the night of April 14th, they will be exhausted, struggling to keep up with the backlog of passenger messages, and when ice warnings arrive from other ships, those warnings will be delivered to the bridge, but perhaps not with the urgency they deserve. Further aft along the starboard side of the boat deck are the officers' quarters, a row of modest cabins where the ship's deck officers sleep when they are off duty. These are small functional rooms, each containing a narrow bunk, a writing desk bolted to the wall, a small wardrobe and a wash basin. The rooms are lit by electric bulbs encased in frosted glass globes. There is no luxury here, no decoration beyond what is strictly necessary. The officers are expected to be available at all times, ready to respond to any emergency, and so their quarters are kept simple and close to the bridge. A few personal items might be visible: a photograph in a frame, a book on the desk, a uniform hanging neatly on a hook, but these men live Spartan lives at sea. Their thoughts focused on duty and responsibility rather than comfort. And then, of course, there are the lifeboats. 16 wooden lifeboats hang from davits along the sides of the boat deck, 8 on each side, painted brilliant white, their oars lashed neatly inside, their canvas covers protecting them from spray and weather. 4 additional collapsible boats are stored on the roof of the officers' quarters, their canvas sides folded down for storage. Together, these 20 boats represent the ship's emergency evacuation system, designed to provide escape in the unlikely event of disaster at sea. But in 1912, lifeboats are viewed more as a formality than a genuine necessity. Ships like the Titanic, with their multiple watertight compartments and advanced engineering, are considered virtually unsinkable. The lifeboats are there because maritime regulations require them, because tradition demands them, not because anyone truly expects to use them. In fact, the Titanic carries lifeboat capacity for only about half of the people aboard, passengers and crew combined. This is not considered a problem. It is assumed that in any emergency the ship will remain afloat long enough for rescue ships to arrive, and the lifeboats will be used to ferry people between vessels, not to evacuate everyone into the open sea. For now, on this calm April morning, the lifeboats hang quietly in their davits, swaying gently with the motion of the ship, their white hulls gleaming in the sunlight. They seem almost decorative, like furniture placed for aesthetic effect rather than practical purpose. Descend 1 level, moving down a short stairway from the boat deck, and you arrive at A deck, known as the promenade deck, a world of glass, light, and leisurely elegance, where the wealthiest passengers spend their days in comfort and style. This is the first-class promenade, a long enclosed walkway that runs along both sides of the ship for several hundred feet, protected from wind, spray and weather by large rectangular glass windows set in gleaming white painted frames. The windows are tall, extending almost from floor to ceiling, allowing passengers to enjoy panoramic views of the sea while remaining sheltered from the elements. The floor beneath your feet is covered in polished linoleum designed to look like parquet wood, arranged in an elegant herringbone pattern. Wicker chairs and cushioned deck loungers are arranged along the walls, positioned to take advantage of the views, inviting passengers to sit and relax for hours at a time. Stewards in crisp white jackets move quietly among the chairs, offering wool blankets for those who feel a chill, serving tea and bouillon from silver pots, engaging in the kind of polite, deferential conversation that makes wealthy passengers feel attended to without feeling intruded upon. The light here is soft and diffused, filtered through the glass windows, giving everything a gentle, dreamlike quality. Sunlight moves across the deck as the day progresses, creating slowly shifting patterns of brightness and shadow. There is a sense of calm here, a sense of timelessness, as if the ship exists outside the normal flow of hours and minutes. Passengers stroll slowly along the promenade, their hands clasped behind their backs, their conversations unhurried and quiet. Topics drift from the weather to the food to plans for arrival in New York to gossip about other passengers. Women wear long dresses in pastel colours, soft pinks, pale blues, cream and lavender, their waists cinched tight, their hats wide-brimmed and decorated with ribbons, feathers and artificial flowers. Men wear three-piece suits in dark wool, their pocket watches attached to gold chains, their shoes polished to a high shine. Children, if they are present at all, are quiet and well-behaved, dressed in miniature versions of adult clothing, watched over by nannies and governesses who keep them from running or making too much noise. At the forward end of A deck, positioned prominently to serve as the main entrance to the ship's first-class interior, is the grand entrance vestibule, a doorway flanked by brass fixtures and carved woodwork that gleams under electric lights. This is the threshold between the open air and the enclosed luxury within, and it has been designed to impress. Passengers pass through this doorway dozens of times during the voyage, entering for meals, leaving for walks, returning to their cabins, and each time the entrance reminds them that they are not simply on a ship. They are in a palace that happens to float. Beyond the entrance lies the first-class reading and writing room, a quiet sanctuary designed primarily for the use of women passengers. The room has been decorated in a style that deliberately evokes an English country manor house. White-panelled walls with delicate mouldings, furniture upholstered in pale fabrics with floral patterns, large windows overlooking the sea that flood the space with natural light. Writing desks are arranged along the walls, each one stocked with fine stationery bearing the white star-line crest embossed in gold, along with pens, ink bottles and blotting paper. Women sit here in the afternoons, composing letters to loved ones back home, writing impersonal journals, or simply gazing out at the endless water, lost in private thoughts. The room smells faintly of perfume, a mixture of lavender, rose, and something powdery and Victorian. There is no loud conversation here, no laughter, no masculine energy. This is a feminine space, designed for quiet reflection and gentle social interaction. The chairs are comfortable without being too casual. The lighting is warm without being too bright. Everything about the room encourages a sense of peaceful gentility. A-Deck is also home to some of the ship's most expensive and luxurious accommodations, the Promenade Suites. These are palatial apartments, each consisting of multiple bedrooms, a sitting room, a private bathroom with a full-size tub, and most impressively, a private section of the promenade deck, enclosed by glass windows and accessible only to the suite's occupants. The furnishings in these suites are exquisite: carved mahogany furniture, velvet drapes in deep jewel tones, Persian and Turkish rugs covering the floors, electric heaters concealed behind decorative grills, crystal light fixtures hanging from ornately plastered ceilings. These suites are occupied by some of the wealthiest passengers aboard: industrialists, financiers, aristocrats, people for whom more wealth is measured not in thousands or even hundreds of thousands, but in millions. They live here in a world apart, insulated from the rest of the ship not just by physical walls but by the invisible barriers of wealth and privilege. Their stewards are assigned exclusively to them. Their meals can be served in their suites if they prefer not to dine publicly. Their privacy is guarded jealously. But even here, in these rooms of extreme luxury and comfort, there is a quietness, a stillness that comes from being at sea. The constant gentle motion of the ship is present even in these insulated spaces. At night, lying in their beds, even the wealthiest passengers can hear the distant pulse of the engines far below, can feel the vibration transmitted through the steel hull, can sense the vast emptiness of the ocean surrounding them on all sides. Now we descend again, moving down the grand staircase to B-Deck, and here we encounter what is perhaps the most iconic space on the entire ship: the grand staircase itself, the architectural centerpiece that more than anything else symbolizes the Titanic's elegance and grandeur. It is impossible to overstate the beauty of this space. The grand staircase is not merely functional, not simply a means of moving between decks. It is theatrical. It is symbolic. It is designed to make an impression, to take your breath away, to remind you at every moment that you are aboard something extraordinary, something unprecedented in the history of maritime travel. The staircase descends through the centre of the ship, connecting 6 different deck levels in a sweeping cascade of carved English oak. The balustrades are wide and smooth, carved with intricate scrollwork and floral motifs, polished to a mirror shine that reflects the light from above. The steps themselves are wide and shallow, covered in thick red carpet held in place by brass rods at each step. The carpet is plush beneath your feet, muffling footsteps, adding to the sense of luxury and refinement. At the top of the staircase, crowning the entire composition, is a wrought iron and glass dome that allows natural light to flood down from above during the day, illuminating the entire space in soft golden tones that seem almost heavenly. The dome itself is a masterpiece of Art Nouveau design featuring elegant curves and botanical motifs rendered in iron and glass. At night, when natural light is absent, electric lights hidden within the dome create the same warm glow, maintaining the staircase's magical atmosphere around the clock. At the centre of the dome, positioned prominently where everyone can see it, is a large ornate clock, its face rendered in white enamel with black Roman numerals, its hands moving with steady precision. The clock is flanked by two carved allegorical figures representing honour and glory crowning time, a symbolic statement about the triumph of human achievement over the passage of years. The carving is elaborate, detailed, representing countless hours of skilled craftsmanship. Passengers descend this staircase slowly, deliberately, pausing on the landings to admire the woodwork, to adjust their gloves, to see and be seen. The staircase is as much a stage as it is a passageway, a space designed for social theatre. It is where first impressions are made, where social hierarchies are subtly reinforced through who walks with whom and who acknowledges whom. It is where wealthy women display their jewels and their Paris gowns, where men show off their tailoring and their confidence. To descend the grand staircase is to participate in a ritual, performance of class and culture. On B deck itself, the staircase opens onto a spacious reception area, a landing furnished with comfortable chairs upholstered in rich fabrics, small tables with potted plants, and decorative elements that continue the staircase's aesthetic. This is a place for lingering, for quiet conversation before dinner, for arranging evening plans, for waiting while companions finish dressing. Stewards stand discreetly nearby, positioned where they can be summoned with a glance or a small gesture, ready to assist with directions, with dinner reservations, with any request that might arise. Beyond the reception area, spreading out along the length of B deck, lie the first-class staterooms and suites, some of the finest accommodations on the ship, each one decorated in a different historical style in an attempt to appeal to varied tastes and to create the impression of staying in a series of different elegant homes rather than in identical ship's cabins. The styles represented include Louis XV, with its Rococo curves and gilded ornament, Louis XVI, with its neoclassical restraint and straight lines, Georgian, with its English proportions and mahogany panelling, Italian Renaissance, with carved walnut and rich textiles, Queen Anne, with its delicate furnishings and pastel colours. Each cabin is a carefully composed historical pastiche, created by skilled craftsmen, working from pattern books and photographs of actual historical interiors. The attention to detail in these spaces is extraordinary. The light fixtures are not generic ship's fittings, but custom-designed pieces appropriate to each cabin's style. The door handles are polished brass, each one unique. The walls are panelled in different types of wood, oak, mahogany, satinwood, walnut, depending on the historical period being evoked. Mirrors are hung in gilt frames. Pictures are mounted in the corners. Fresh flowers are delivered daily by stewards who enter silently to refresh the rooms. Electric heaters built into the walls keep the cabins at a comfortable temperature, a luxury that would be impossible on older ships. Call buttons mounted beside the beds allow passengers to summon stewards at any hour of the day or night. Most of these first-class cabins include private bathrooms, an amenity that was almost unheard of at sea before the Titanic. The bathrooms feature porcelain toilets, sinks with running hot and cold water, and in many cases full-size bathtubs. The fixtures are finished in polished chrome or brass. Thick towels are provided, monogrammed with the White Star Line logo. Small bars of soap wrapped in paper are replaced daily. And then there are the suites, the truly palatial accommodations that occupy significant portions of B-Deck's length. The most famous of these is Suite B52/54/56, a sprawling apartment that occupies a significant portion of the port side of B-Deck. This suite includes 2 large bedrooms, each with its own bathroom, a spacious sitting room, 2 wardrobe rooms for storage, and most impressively, a private promenade deck 50 feet in length, enclosed by glass windows and accessible through French doors from the sitting room. The furnishings in this suite are among the most opulent on the ship. The sitting room features a working fireplace, entirely decorative, as it burns electricity rather than actual fire, but realistic enough to create the impression of a cosy English drawing room. There is a writing desk of carved mahogany, a small bookshelf stocked with leather-bound volumes, upholstered chairs and a sofa covered in rich fabrics, gilt-framed mirrors, crystal light fixtures. The bedrooms feature large beds with carved headboards, dressers with marble tops, full-length mirrors. The private promenade allows the suite's occupants to walk outside without mixing with other passengers, to sit in deck chairs reserved exclusively for them to enjoy the sea air in complete privacy. This particular suite was occupied on the Titanic's maiden voyage by J. Bruce Ismay, the managing director of the White Star Line, the very man who had conceived the Titanic and her sister ship Olympic, who had overseen their design and construction, who had pushed for their size and luxury. He lived in this suite as both passenger and proprietor, moving through the ship to observe its operation, to receive reports from Captain Smith, to ensure that everything was functioning according to his vision. From the windows of these suites and cabins, passengers can watch the ocean roll past, endless and ever-changing. During the day, the sea might be blue or grey or green, depending on the light and the weather. At night, when the ship is lit and the sea is dark, the windows become mirrors, reflecting back the warm glow of the interior, turning the glass into pools of golden light that make the darkness outside seem even darker by contrast. Descend once more, moving down either the grand staircase or one of the ship's several other stairways reserved for first-class passengers, and we arrive at C deck, known as the shelter deck, so named because it is the highest deck that is completely enclosed, sheltered from the weather above. This deck is quieter than those above. It is a transitional space, less grand than B deck, less social than A deck. The ceilings are slightly lower here. The corridors are narrower. The light is softer, coming not from skylights and large windows, but from electric bulbs in fixtures mounted to the walls and ceilings. It is here that the ship begins to feel less like a palace and more like what it actually is, a ship, a large and complex machine designed to transport people across an ocean. C deck houses a mixture of accommodations, first-class staterooms toward the bow and amidships, second-class cabins toward the stern, and a complex network of passageways, pantries and service areas connecting the two. The corridors here are long and straight, panelled in wood that is simpler and less ornate than on the decks above. The wood is still polished, still maintained to a high standard, but it lacks the elaborate carving and inlay work found in the more public spaces. The carpets are thinner, more utilitarian. The lighting is adequate but not abundant. The first-class cabins on C deck are comfortable and well appointed, but they lack the grandeur of those on A and B decks. They feature single or double beds with white linens, small dressers with mirrors, washstands with running cold water and sometimes hot water, and electric lights controlled by wall switches, a modern convenience that still felt somewhat novel in 1912. Some cabins have portholes, round windows that can be opened for ventilation. offering views of the sea and natural light. Other cabins are interior rooms, windowless spaces located in the center of the ship, away from the hull. These interior cabins are quieter, more insulated from the sound of the sea, but they can feel claustrophobic to some passengers, especially on a voyage lasting several days. The passengers who occupy these sea-deck first-class cabins are wealthy, but not ostentatiously so. They are travelling in first class because they can afford it, because it offers comfort and convenience, but they do not require or perhaps cannot afford the extreme luxury of the upper deck suites. They might be successful merchants, established professionals, modestly wealthy families travelling together. They dine in the first-class dining saloon with everyone else. They use the same public rooms, the same promenades, the same lounges, but their private accommodations are more modest, more practical. As you move aft along sea deck, walking through the long corridors with their polished wood panelling and soft electric lights, the character of the ship changes gradually but unmistakably. The wood panelling gives way to painted steel walls. The carpets disappear entirely, replaced by dull linoleum in neutral colours. The fixtures become simpler, more functional. You've crossed an invisible but very real line, the boundary between first class and second class, between the world of the wealthy and the world of the middle class. Second class on the Titanic was not a hardship or a compromise to be endured. In fact, second-class accommodations on the Titanic were equivalent to first class on many other ships of the era. The cabins were clean, well-maintained, spacious by the standards of the time, and equipped with bunk beds that could be folded up during the day to create more living space, small dressers with drawers, hooks for hanging clothes, and wash basins with running water. Families travelling in second class often had their own cabins, giving them privacy and a space to call their own during the voyage. The passengers here represented the middle class, teachers and school administrators, clergymen and missionaries, shopkeepers and small business owners, merchants and travelling salesmen, skilled tradesmen and minor government officials. They were not wealthy, but they were respectable, educated, ambitious. The passageways of sea deck are busy with activity throughout the day and night. Stewards move constantly through these corridors, carrying trays laden with food and drink, delivering messages, responding to call bells that ring from within the cabins. Their work is endless and largely invisible. They appear when needed and disappear when their tasks are complete. They know every passenger's name, every preference, every peculiarity. They move through the ship like ghosts, essential but unseen. Tucked into alcoves along the corridors are the stewards' pantries, small service rooms stocked with linens, dishes, silverware, cleaning supplies, and everything else needed to maintain the cabins and serve the passengers. These pantries are cramped, efficiently organised spaces where stewards prepare tea trays, arrange breakfast orders, fold fresh linens, and take brief moments of rest between tasks. The pantries smell of tea, coffee, furniture polish, and the faint mustiness of stored linens. At the aft end of sea deck, near the third-class areas, the corridors become narrower still, the ceilings lower, the lighting dimmer. The walls here are painted white or pale cream, practical colours chosen for their ability to reflect what light is available. The floors are covered in simple linoleum, easy to clean and maintain. There are fewer decorations here, fewer comforts, fewer concessions to aesthetics. This is a utilitarian space designed for efficiency rather than impression, but there is also a sense of warmth in these aft corridors, a sense of community and shared experience. Third-class passengers on the Titanic were predominantly immigrants, families leaving behind everything they knew in search of better lives in America. They came from Ireland, England, Sweden, Syria, Armenia, Croatia, and a dozen other countries. They travelled with little in the way of possessions, but they travelled with enormous reserves of hope and determination. For many of them, the price of a third-class ticket on the Titanic represented years of savings, a collective effort by extended families pooling their resources to send one or two members ahead to establish a foothold in the new world. Now we descend to D-Deck, the saloon deck, and here we encounter some of the ship's most important public spaces, including one of the most magnificent rooms on the entire vessel, the first-class dining saloon. This enormous room is the largest single space on the Titanic, spanning the entire width of the ship and stretching over 100 feet in length from bow to stern. It is designed to seat over 500 passengers at once, and it has been decorated with a level of elegance and sophistication that rivals the finest restaurants in London, Paris, or New York. The ceiling is high, nearly 12 feet and arched, painted in soft cream tones and accented with elaborate gilded mouldings that catch and reflect the light. The walls are panelled in oak that has been carved with decorative motifs and polished until it glows with a warm honeyed light. Large rectangular windows line the walls, though these are more decorative than functional, as the room is located below the waterline and the windows look out only onto the ship's interior structure. Nevertheless, they are dressed with heavy curtains in deep colours, creating the illusion of looking out onto some grand exterior vista. Crystal chandeliers hang from the ceiling at regular intervals, their hundreds of cut-glass prisms catching the electric light and scattering it across the room in tiny rainbows. The light from these chandeliers is warm and flattering, designed to make food look appetizing, skin look healthy, and conversations feel intimate even in this vast space. The floor is covered in thick carpet in a rich burgundy colour, patterned with elaborate floral and geometric designs. The tables are arranged in neat rows, each one covered with pristine white linen tablecloths that hang almost to the floor. The chairs are substantial pieces of furniture, upholstered in deep red leather, with carved wooden backs and arms. Each place setting includes multiple pieces of silverware, forks, knives, spoons of various sizes for different courses, along with crystal glasses for water, wine, and champagne, and fine china plates bearing the white Starline logo in gold. Meals in the first-class dining saloon are not simply about eating. They are elaborate social rituals, performances of wealth and refinement that stretch over 2 hours or more. Dinner, the main meal of the day, is served beginning at 7 o'clock in the evening and typically consists of 10 or more courses, each one carefully prepared by the ship's team of skilled chefs and presented with theatrical flourish by an army of stewards. A typical dinner menu might begin with hors d'oeuvres and oysters, followed by 2 kinds of soup, a clear consommé and a cream soup, then fish prepared with delicate sauces, then a choice of several main courses, roasted meats, game birds, lamb, beef, accompanied by fresh vegetables, potatoes prepared in various ways and rich sauces, then a palate-cleansing course of punch or sorbet, then cold dishes, aspic, foie gras, pâté, then more hot dishes, then salads, then a selection of dessert, puddings, pastries, ice creams, fruits, then cheese and crackers. Finally, coffee and petit fours served in the lounges after the meal concludes. Wine flows freely throughout the meal, different varieties paired with different courses, white wines with the fish, red wines with the meat, sweet wines with dessert. Champagne appears frequently. Wealthy passengers sometimes order entire bottles of rare vintages, ostentatiously displaying their wealth through their choice of alcohol. Conversations during these meals are polite, measured, conducted in quiet voices that nevertheless manage to fill the room with a gentle hum of human interaction. Topics range from business to travel to society gossip to plans for activities in New York. Passengers are dressed in formal evening wear, men in white tie and tails, women in elaborate gowns with long trains, their necks and wrists adorned with jewellery that represents fortunes. At the far end of the dining saloon, positioned on a raised platform so they can be seen and heard throughout the room, a string orchestra plays throughout the meal. The musicians are dressed in formal attire, their instruments polished to a high shine. They play a carefully selected program of classical pieces, light waltzes, and popular melodies of the day, music chosen to be pleasant and unobtrusive, to enhance the dining experience without demanding attention or interrupting conversation. The music drifts through the space like a gentle current, weaving between the tables, blending with the soft clink of silverware on china and the murmur of voices. The entire experience is designed to create the impression not of being on a ship in the middle of the ocean, but of dining in the grandest hotel or restaurant in any major city. The Titanic's designers understood that wealthy passengers were accustomed to certain standards, certain metal rituals, and the dining saloon was meant to reassure them that those standards would be maintained even at sea. But D-Deck is not only for first-class passengers. The ship's class divisions are maintained strictly, but they exist side by side, separated by doors and corridors rather than by vast distances. Move aft along D-Deck through doors that are kept closed to prevent first-class passengers from wandering into other areas, and you will find the second-class dining saloon, a smaller but equally respectable and well-appointed space. The room is panelled in light oak, creating a brighter, less formal atmosphere than the first-class saloon. The tables are covered in white linen, the chairs are sturdy and comfortable if not luxurious, and the place settings include proper silverware and china, though perhaps not as many pieces or as fine a quality as in first class. The meals served here are simpler than those in first class, consisting of 4 or 5 courses rather than 10, but they are still substantial and well prepared. A typical dinner might include soup, fish or meat, vegetables, and dessert. Hearty, satisfying food prepared with care. Second-class passengers dine on roasted chicken, baked ham, boiled potatoes, green beans, bread with butter, and tea or coffee. The food is plentiful and flavourful, representative of solid middle-class cooking rather than haute cuisine. The atmosphere in the second-class dining saloon is more relaxed, more familial than in first class. Passengers linger over their meals, chatting with table mates who might have been strangers a few days earlier, but who have become acquaintances or even friends through the shared experience of the voyage. Conversations are more animated here, less concerned with maintaining social appearances. Children are more visible, though still expected to be well behaved. There is laughter, jokes, shared stories about where people have come from and where they are going. And further aft still, at the very stern of D-Deck, accessible through a maze of corridors that wind through the ship's working spaces, is the third-class general room, a large open space that serves as the social centre of third-class life on the Titanic. This room is plain but cheerful, functional rather than elegant. The walls are painted white, the floor is covered in linoleum rather than carpet. The furniture consists of wooden benches and tables bolted to the floor to prevent them from sliding when the ship rolls. There is no elaborate decoration, no carved panelling, no crystal chandeliers. But there is life here, abundant and irrepressible. This is where third-class passengers gather in the evenings to talk, to laugh, to make music, to dance, to forget for a while the hardships they have left behind and the uncertainties they face ahead. In one corner stands an upright piano, often played by one of the passengers, folk songs, dance tunes, melodies from the old country played from memory. Someone might produce a fiddle or an accordion, and suddenly there is music filling the room, lively and infectious. Children run between the tables, their laughter echoing off the walls, their faces bright with the excitement of being part of something larger than themselves. Older passengers sit and talk, sharing stories in a babble of different languages: English, Irish, Gaelic, Swedish, Croatian, Armenian, Arabic. The air in this room is thick with the smells of tobacco smoke, sweat, and the lingering odours of the simple food served to third-class passengers: boiled cabbage, salted fish, black bread. It is not the refined atmosphere of the first-class lounges, but it is warm and human and alive in a way that the more elegant spaces sometimes are not. This is not luxury, but it is community. It is hope. It is the human spirit refusing to be diminished by circumstance. And in its own way, it is as beautiful as anything on the ship. Descend again, moving deeper into the ship's interior, and we reach E-deck, the upper deck, the most heavily populated deck on the entire vessel, where the majority of the ship's passengers sleep, and where much of the ship's daily work takes place. This is where the Titanic's human heartbeat is strongest, where the largest number of lives intersect and overlap in the complex social ecology of the ship. E-deck is a labyrinth of corridors, cabins, pantries, and crew spaces, a three-dimensional maze that can be confusing even to experienced crew members. The passageways are long and narrow, painted white or cream to maximize the reflection of the electric lights that hang at regular intervals. The air here is noticeably warmer than on the decks above, heated by the proximity to the machinery below and by the presence of so many human bodies in close quarters. The smell is different too, a complex mixture of cooking food from the nearby galleys, laundry soap, coal smoke that permeates everything despite the ventilation system, and the inevitable odours of human habitation. The first-class cabins on E-deck are modest by the standards of the upper decks, smaller, simpler, more utilitarian. Many are interior cabins, windowless spaces lit only by electric bulbs, insulated from the sounds of the sea, but also from natural light and fresh air. These rooms are used primarily for sleeping and changing clothes. Passengers who occupy them spend little time there, preferring to be in the public rooms and open decks above. The cabins contain beds, small dressers, washstands, hooks for hanging clothes, and little else. They are clean and functional, maintained to a high standard by the stewards who enter several times each day to make beds, empty wash basins, and refresh linens. Second-class cabins on E-deck are arranged in neat rows along both sides of the ship's long corridors, each room almost identical to the next, creating a sense of uniformity and order. Families are given larger cabins with multiple bunks that fold down from the walls. Single travellers are assigned to smaller cabins, often sharing with strangers of the same gender. The accommodations are clean, the bedding is fresh, but there is little privacy and less comfort. The walls are thin enough that you can hear your neighbours coughing, talking, moving around in the night. The doors have simple locks, but sound passes through them easily. At night, these corridors come alive with the sounds of human life in close quarters, babies crying, children laughing or arguing, adults talking in low voices, the occasional cough or sneeze, the creaking of bunk beds as people shift in their sleep. It is a reminder that the Titanic, for all its grandeur and technological sophistication, is ultimately just a vessel filled with people, each one carrying their own hopes, fears, memories, and dreams. The crew quarters are also located on E-deck, tucked into the forward and aft sections of the ship in spaces that passengers rarely see and never visit. These are dormitory-style accommodations, even more cramped and basic than the third-class passenger cabins. Stewards, cooks, bakers, waiters, and other service staff sleep here in the narrow bunk beds, often sharing rooms with a dozen or more other men, sometimes sleeping in shifts because there are not enough beds for everyone to rest at once. The rooms are hot and poorly ventilated, especially those located near the galleys and engine spaces. There are no windows, no portholes, no source of natural light or fresh air. The noise from the machinery below is constant, a low rumble and vibration that never stops, that becomes part of the background of existence, noticed only when it changes or when it stops. The crew members store their few possessions in small lockers or under their bunks. Privacy is impossible, luxury is unimaginable. But the crew does not complain, at least not openly. They're grateful for the work, grateful for the wages that allow them to support families back home, grateful to be part of the crew of the most famous ship in the world. Many of them come from working-class backgrounds, where hard labour and difficult conditions are simply the price of survival. The accommodations on the Titanic, while far from comfortable, are no worse and sometimes better than what they have experienced elsewhere. E-Deck is also home to the ship's vast galley complex, the industrial kitchens where all the meals for the entire ship are prepared, cooked and plated before being carried up to the various dining saloons by teams of stewards. These galleys are enormous, sprawling spaces that occupy a significant portion of E-Deck's length. They are filled with massive coal-fired cooking ranges, each one containing multiple ovens and burners. Large boiling pots sit atop the ranges, filled with water for vegetables, stocks for soups, or liquids for poaching. Roasting ovens produce the meats that form the centerpiece of first-class dinners. Baking ovens produce the hundreds of loaves of bread, rolls, and pastries consumed each day. Grills sizzle with fish and chops. Steam tables keep food warm while it waits to be served. The heat in the galleys is intense, often exceeding 90 degrees even with the ventilation system running. The noise is overwhelming, the clang of pots and pans, the shouting of chefs giving orders, the hiss of steam, the roar of the fires. The cooks and kitchen staff work in shifts around the clock, preparing breakfast for early risers, lunch for afternoon diners, the elaborate evening meals, and late-night snacks for the passengers who request them. The work is physically demanding, the hours are long, and the expectations are high. The air in the galleys is thick with steam and rich with the smells of cooking food, roasting meat, baking bread, boiling vegetables, reducing sauces. Depending on the time of day, you might smell bacon frying for breakfast, soup simmering for lunch, or the sweet aroma of desserts baking for dinner. These smells drift through the corridors of E-Deck, reminding everyone of the constant cycle of meals that structures life aboard the ship. Adjacent to the galleys are the pantries and storerooms, vast spaces stacked floor to ceiling with provisions. Crates of vegetables, potatoes, carrots, onions, cabbages, barrels of flour for bread and pastries, racks holding sides of salted beef and pork, wheels of cheese wrapped in cloth, boxes of tea from India and Ceylon, bottles of wine from France and Italy, canned goods, dried fruits, spices in tins. The Titanic carries enough food to feed her 2,200 passengers and crew for several weeks if necessary, though the voyage to New York is expected to take only about a week under normal conditions. Every ingredient is carefully inventoried, every item logged and tracked. The ship's chief steward maintains detailed records of what is consumed each day, ensuring that supplies remain adequate and that waste is minimized. Nothing is taken for granted. Every meal represents a complex logistical achievement involving dozens of people working in careful coordination. And then there are the third-class cabins located at the bow and stern of E-Deck, in the areas farthest from the ship's centre, where the motion of the ship is most pronounced during rough weather. These are the most basic accommodations on the Titanic. Small rooms with metal bunk beds bolted to the walls, thin mattresses filled with horsehair or straw, coarse wool blankets and no pillows. The rooms are equipped with a single wash basin shared by all occupants, providing cold water only. There are no private bathrooms. Instead, communal lavatories are located at the end of each corridor, shared by dozens of people. Families travelling in third class are often separated by gender due to the ship's regulations and the limited availability of family cabins. Men and unmarried male passengers are assigned to dormitory-style rooms in one section of the ship. Women and children are assigned to separate sections. This separation can be particularly difficult for families who have already endured the trauma of leaving their homes and who now find themselves divided even during the voyage. The rooms are crowded. Privacy is a luxury these passengers cannot afford. At night, when everyone is trying to sleep, the sounds of breathing, snoring, coughing, and shifting bodies fill the air. Babies cry. Children whimper in their sleep. Adults lie awake thinking about the lives they have left behind and the uncertain futures that await them. Yet even here, in these cramped and basic accommodations, there is dignity. Even here, there is hope. The passengers in these cabins are not victims to be pitied. They are human beings of courage and determination, people who have made the difficult decision to leave everything familiar in pursuit of better lives. They are farmers and labourers, craftsmen and shopkeepers, mothers and fathers and children. They carry with them the hopes of entire families, entire villages. Every mile the Titanic travels brings them closer to the promise of America, to the dream of a new beginning. We descend once more, and now we reach F deck, the middle deck, the deepest level where passengers still live in significant numbers, though the accommodations here are reserved almost exclusively for third-class passengers and crew. This is the domain of the poorest travellers, the immigrants and labourers who represent the bottom tier of the ship's rigid social hierarchy. This is where hope and hardship exist in closest proximity. The corridors here are narrower than those on the decks above, the ceilings noticeably lower, creating a more confined and claustrophobic atmosphere. The walls are painted white, but the paint is chipped and worn in places, marked by the constant flow of people and luggage through the tight spaces. The floors are covered in linoleum in plain colours, grey or tan, chosen for durability and ease of cleaning rather than aesthetics. The lighting is dim, provided by bare electric bulbs hanging from simple fixtures on the ceiling, spaced far enough apart that pools of shadow form between them. The air on F deck is thick and warm, heavy with humidity from the proximity to the ocean outside and from the breath and sweat of hundreds of people living in close quarters. The smell is a complex mixture: cooking food from the third-class galley, damp wool from clothes that never quite dry in the ship's interior, tobacco smoke, unwashed bodies, and the faint but persistent odour of the ship's bilges not far below. The third-class cabins on F deck are small and austere, designed to maximise the number of passengers who can be accommodated in the available space. Each room contains 2 to 4 bunk beds bolted to the walls, one above the other, with barely enough space between them for a person to sit upright. The mattresses are thin, offering little cushioning against the metal frames beneath. Blankets are provided, but they are coarse and scratchy, made from cheap wool. There are no pillows, or if pillows are provided, they are thin and flat, filled with straw. A single small wash basin is mounted to the wall in each cabin, providing cold water through a simple tap. There is no hot water in third class. There are no private bathrooms. Instead, communal lavatories, basic facilities with toilets and sinks, are located at the end of each corridor, shared by all the passengers in that section of the ship. Lines form during busy times of the day, and privacy is minimal. Storage space in these cabins is almost non-existent. Passengers keep their belongings in bags or small trunks stored under the lower bunks or hung from hooks on the walls. Many third-class passengers travel with very little, a change of clothes, perhaps a few personal items, family photographs, religious objects. Everything they own can fit into a single bag. Families travelling in third class face particular challenges. Large families are sometimes split between multiple cabins due to space limitations. Mothers with young children might be assigned to one cabin, while fathers and older sons are sent to another. This separation, though temporary, adds to the stress and disorientation of the journey. Despite the harsh conditions, there is a sense of community in third class that is perhaps stronger than in the more comfortable but more isolated first and second class sections. People bond quickly over shared hardships and shared hopes. Friendships form across language barriers through gestures, smiles, and the universal language of music. In the evenings, passengers gather in the third-class general room or in the open spaces of the third-class decks, where they sing songs, tell stories, and dance to the music of fiddles, accordions, or simple percussion. The third-class dining areas on F-deck are plain but functional spaces where passengers eat communal meals served family-style at long tables. The food is simple and filling: porridge for breakfast, soup and bread for lunch, stew or boiled meat with potatoes and vegetables for dinner. The meals lack the variety and refinement of the higher classes, but they provide adequate nutrition. For many passengers, particularly those who have recently experienced poverty or famine in their home countries, the food on the Titanic represents abundance rather than deprivation. F-deck is also home to the ship's hospital, a small but reasonably well-equipped medical facility designed to handle the routine illnesses and minor injuries that inevitably occur on a voyage carrying more than 2,000 people. The hospital consists of a waiting room, an examination room equipped with basic medical instruments, and a small ward with several beds for patients who require overnight observation or treatment. The medical staff includes a ship's surgeon and several assistants trained in basic nursing care. Most of their patients are crew members suffering from burns sustained in the boiler rooms, cuts and bruises from manual labour, or exhaustion from the grueling work schedules. Occasionally passengers fall ill. Seasickness is common during rough weather, and there are always a few cases of influenza, stomach complaints, or other minor ailments. The hospital is kept scrupulously clean, with white-painted walls and floors scrubbed daily. Medical supplies are stored in locked cabinets: bandages, antiseptics, medicines, surgical instruments. The surgeon maintains detailed records of every patient treated, every medicine dispensed, every procedure performed. Deeper still within F-deck, in spaces that passengers never see, are additional crew dormitories. Long, narrow rooms lined with bunk beds, where the firemen, trimmers and greasers sleep between their brutal shifts in the boiler rooms and engine spaces below. These accommodations are even more Spartan than the crew quarters on E-deck. The rooms are unbearably hot, located as they are adjacent to the boiler rooms, with only minimal ventilation to provide relief. The men who sleep here work 4-hour shifts in temperatures exceeding 100 degrees, shoveling coal or hauling it from the bunkers, then return to these stifling rooms to collapse into their bunks, too exhausted to do more than remove their boots before falling into a fitful sleep. Their faces are perpetually streaked with coal dust. Their hands are calloused and scarred from handling shovels and coal. Their lungs are filled with coal dust that will eventually shorten their lives. They earn modest wages for backbreaking labour, but they accept these conditions because work is scarce and families must be fed. These men are invisible to most of the ship's passengers. They exist in a separate world, a netherworld of heat and noise and darkness, labouring without recognition or thanks to keep the engines running and the ship moving. They are the foundation upon which all the luxury and comfort of the upper decks ultimately rests. Now we descend to G-deck, the lower deck, the final level of the ship where human activity regularly takes place, though this deck is dedicated almost entirely to cargo, storage, and the ship's essential system, rather than to passenger accommodations. This is no longer a place designed for people to live. This is a place of function, of utility, of the unglamorous work that makes the ship possible. The corridors on G-Deck are purely utilitarian, stripped of any pretense of comfort or aesthetic appeal. The walls are bare steel plates, painted white or light grey for visibility but otherwise unadorned. The floors are metal grating in many sections, allowing you to see down into the spaces below and allowing water to drain through in the event of leaks or flooding. The lighting is harsh and industrial, bare electric bulbs into simple fixtures, casting sharp shadows and creating stark contrasts between light and dark. The air smells of oil, coal dust, metal, and seawater, the fundamental odours of a working ship. The temperature varies depending on location, cold in the forward areas near the ship's bow, warm or even hot in the aft sections near the machinery spaces. The sounds are different here too. The steady rumble of the engines is much louder, transmitted through the steel structure of the ship, and you can hear the slosh and gurgle of water against the hull plates, a reminder that only a few inches of steel separate this space from the ocean outside. At the forward end of G-Deck is the mailroom, a surprisingly large space given its specialised function. The room is filled with wooden sorting racks mounted to the walls and arranged in rows, each one containing dozens of slots for organising mail by destination. Canvas mail sacks, each one bearing postal markings and destination labels, are stacked on the floor and hung from hooks. The Titanic carries over 3,000 bags of mail, letters, packages, periodicals, all destined for addresses across the United States and Canada. 5 postal clerks work in this space, employed not by the White Star Line but by the postal services of their respective countries. 3 are Americans, 2 are British. They work around the clock in shifts, sorting the mail, keeping meticulous records, protecting this precious cargo with almost religious dedication. The mailroom is considered sacred space by these men. Every letter represents a connection between human hearts, a declaration of love, a request for help, a sharing of news, a maintenance of relationships across vast distances. The postal clerks take their responsibility seriously, knowing that countless people are waiting for the letters that pass through their hands. Adjacent to the mailroom are the baggage rooms, vast storage areas filled with trunks, suitcases, hat boxes, crates, and parcels of every description. Wealthy first-class passengers travel with enormous amounts of luggage. A single passenger might bring a dozen steamer trunks containing entire wardrobes, different outfits for different times of day, different occasions, different weather conditions. These trunks are stacked in careful rows, labelled with cabin numbers and passenger names. Stewards retrieve specific pieces of luggage as passengers request them, carrying them up to the cabins above. Further aft along G-Deck are the refrigerated storage rooms, kept at temperatures just above freezing through a combination of ice and early mechanical refrigeration technology. These insulated rooms hold the ship's perishable provisions, fresh meat, fish, poultry, dairy products, eggs, fresh fruits and vegetables. Butchers enter these cold rooms several times each day to select cuts of meat for the day's meals. The cold is intense enough to make your breath visible, and workers can spend only limited time inside before retreating to warmer areas. And then there are the cargo holds, massive open spaces occupying much of G-Deck's length, filled with crates, barrels, and boxes containing commercial cargo being transported across the Atlantic. The Titanic is not exclusively a passenger ship, she is also a cargo vessel, earning revenue by transporting goods as well as people. The cargo is remarkably diverse. Machinery and machine parts destined for American factories, textiles and clothing for New York shops, furniture for wealthy homes, even several automobiles belonging to first-class passengers who are bringing their vehicles to America. One shipment consists of ostrich feathers, thousands of plumes destined for the fashion houses of New York, where they will be used to decorate ladies' hats. The cargo holds also contain countless personal belongings of immigrants. Family heirlooms, tools of trade, small treasures too valuable or too meaningful to be left behind. The cargo holds are dark and cavernous. The only light comes from portable electric lamps carried by crew members who occasionally need to access something stored deep within these spaces. The air is cold and damp. The ceiling is low, crossed by beams and pipes that require constant vigilance to avoid hitting your head. The sound of the engines reverberates through these spaces, amplified by the steel walls until it becomes almost overwhelming. G-deck is also where a crucial corridor runs along the starboard side of the ship, a passageway known to the crew as Scotland Road, though its official designation is simply the Working Passage. This corridor is over 400 feet long, running nearly the entire length of the ship, and it serves as the main artery for crew movement, allowing workers to travel quickly from the forward crew quarters to the boiler rooms amidships and the engine rooms aft without ever passing through passenger areas. Scotland Road is a busy, chaotic space throughout the day and night. Stewards hurry along it carrying trays and linens. Kitchen workers transport food from the storage areas to the galleys. Firemen and trimmers walk to and from their shifts in the boiler rooms, their faces black with coal dust, their bodies bent with exhaustion. Engineers move between the engine room and the workshops carrying tools and spare parts. This corridor is the invisible highway of the ship's labour force, the route along which thousands of journeys take place each day, unseen by passengers who occupy the decks above. It is the ship's circulatory system, essential to its functioning yet hidden from view. And now we must descend into the depths, into the spaces where the very heart of the ship beats, where the Titanic is less a floating hotel and more a massive machine, a triumph of industrial engineering. Now we enter the boiler rooms. There are 6 boiler rooms on the Titanic, numbered from 1 to 6, arranged in sequence from bow to stern, each one a vast chamber that extends from G-deck down to the very bottom of the ship, from the waterline down through several levels to the keel itself. Each boiler room is over 50 feet long, 30 feet wide, and extends upward through multiple deck levels, creating spaces that feel more like industrial cathedrals than rooms. Each boiler room contains between 3 and 5 massive Scotch marine boilers, enormous cylindrical structures standing over 15 feet tall and weighing many tons each. These boilers are the muscle of the ship, burning coal to heat water into steam, which then travels through a complex network of pipes to power the engines that drive the propellers that push the ship through the water at 22 knots. The heat in these spaces is almost unbearable. The temperature often exceeds 100 degrees Fahrenheit, sometimes reaching 110 or even higher when all the boilers are being fired at maximum capacity. The air is thick with coal dust that hangs suspended like fog, getting into your lungs, coating your throat, making every breath a challenge. The light is a flickering orange glow cast by the open furnace doors, dozens of them, each one revealing the intense white-hot fire burning inside the boiler, consuming coal, producing the steam that gives the ship life. The noise in the boiler rooms is absolutely deafening. The roar of the fires sounds like the breath of dragons. The hiss of steam escaping from valves and pipes creates a constant background static that never stops. The clang of coal shovels striking steel plates echoes off the metal walls. The shouts of firemen calling to each other, coordinating their work, are barely audible above the industrial symphony. This is where the firemen work, the coal trimmers and stokers who form the foundation of the ship's crew. Their job is to shovel coal into the furnaces, maintaining the fires at the temperature and intensity required to produce sufficient steam pressure to power the engines. It is brutal, relentless, soul-crushing labour. A single fireman might shovel several tons of coal during a 4-hour shift, working in temperatures that would be considered dangerous by any modern standard. The coal is stored in bunkers adjacent to each boiler room, massive storage compartments holding hundreds of tons of coal that must last for the entire voyage. The coal is brought from these bunkers by trimmers, men whose job is to shovel coal from the bunkers into wheelbarrows, then push those wheelbarrows across the boiler room to the firemen who stand before the furnaces, then return for another load, over and over, hundreds of times each shift. The firemen work in teams, stripped to the waist despite the heat, their bodies glistening with sweat, their skin blackened by coal dust that adheres to the sweat and becomes almost like a second skin. They move in rhythm, practiced and efficient. A furnace door is open, the interior glowing white-hot. A shovelful of coal is thrown in. The door is closed. A few seconds pass. The next door is opened. More coal. The pattern continues endlessly, hour after hour. The work is exhausting, dangerous, and utterly thankless. These men are never seen by the passengers who stroll the promenades or dine in the saloons above. They never walk the first-class decks or enjoy the ship's amenities. They exist in a separate world, a hidden world of heat and darkness and back-breaking labour, toiling without recognition or gratitude, so that the ship above can remain comfortable, bright, and moving. And yet there is a kind of pride among these men, a camaraderie born of shared hardship. They know their work matters. They know the ship depends on them absolutely. Without them, without their endless shovelling, without their willingness to endure these infernal conditions, the Titanic would be nothing more than a hollow shell drifting helplessly at the mercy of wind and current. The boiler rooms are connected to each other by watertight doors, massive steel barriers designed to seal off each section of the ship in the event of emergency. These doors, each weighing several tons, can be closed from the bridge at the touch of a button, dropping down on a hydraulic mechanism to create watertight seals. In normal operation, the doors remain open, allowing crew members to move freely between boiler rooms. But if water ever begins to enter the ship, if the hull is breached, these doors can be closed within seconds, trapping anyone who happens to be on the wrong side. It is a calculated risk, a compromise between safety and efficiency. The doors are necessary to prevent flooding from spreading throughout the ship. But their very existence means that some men, if they are in the wrong place at the wrong time, might be sealed into a flooding compartment with no way out. The firemen know this. They accept it as one more risk among many. They work beneath the waterline in spaces that would flood almost immediately if the hull were breached. They work in heat that can kill through dehydration and heat stroke. They work with machinery that can maim or kill if handled carelessly. They have chosen this work, or more accurately, poverty and necessity have chosen it for them, and they accept its dangers with grim resignation. Beyond the boiler rooms, further aft, lies the engineering space that represents the technological heart of the Titanic, the engine room, a cathedral of steel and steam where the raw power of the boilers is converted into the mechanical motion that drives the ship. This space is enormous, extending upward through multiple deck levels, creating a vast chamber filled with machinery on a scale that is difficult to comprehend unless you stand within it and let the sheer size overwhelm you. Two massive reciprocating engines dominate the space, each one standing 3 stories tall, each one consisting of enormous cylinders, pistons, connecting rods, and cranks all moving in perfect synchronized harmony. These engines are triple expansion reciprocating engines, representing the pinnacle of steam engine technology. Steam from the boilers enters the engines at high pressure, drives the first piston, then is routed to a larger cylinder where it drives a second piston, then to an even larger cylinder for a third expansion, extracting every possible bit of energy from the steam before it is finally exhausted. The pistons, each one several feet in diameter, move up and down with tremendous force, driving connecting rods that turn massive crankshafts that ultimately rotate the propeller shafts. The scale of the machinery is staggering. The pistons alone weigh several tons each. The connecting rods are as thick as tree trunks. The crankshafts are massive forged steel components that must withstand enormous forces. Everything is built to tolerances measured in fractions of inches, despite the massive size. The precision required to build and maintain these engines is extraordinary. The noise in the engine room is overwhelming but different from the noise in the boiler rooms. Here the sound is more rhythmic, more mechanical, the steady thump, thump, thump of the pistons moving, the whoosh, whoosh, whoosh of steam entering and exhausting the cylinders, the rumble and vibration of the entire structure resonating with the power of contained motion. The floor vibrates constantly beneath your feet, transmitted through the steel plates from the engines and the rotating machinery. You can feel the power in your bones, in your chest, in your teeth. The ship is alive with motion and energy, and nowhere is that more apparent than here in the engine room. Engineers move through this mechanical landscape with practiced ease, their movements precise and confident. They are dressed in oil-stained overalls and cotton shirts. They carry wrenches, oil cans, rags, and notebooks for recording readings from the dozens of gauges that monitor temperature, pressure, speed, and vibration. Their hands are scarred and calloused from years of working with machinery. Their faces are lined with concentration. Their ears are damaged from years of exposure to industrial noise. These men are responsible for keeping the engines running smoothly, for detecting and correcting any problems before they become serious, for maintaining the thousands of components that must work together in perfect harmony. If a bearing begins to overheat, they must notice and address it. If a valve begins to leak, they must repair it. If a gauge indicates abnormal pressure, they must investigate and correct the issue. The engines cannot be allowed to fail. The ship depends on them absolutely. At the aft end of the engine room, positioned between the two reciprocating engines, is a newer technology, a Parsons low-pressure turbine engine. This turbine uses the exhaust steam from the reciprocating engines, steam that still contains considerable energy, despite having already expanded 3 times through the reciprocating cylinders. The turbine consists of a shaft surrounded by hundreds of blades, designed so that the steam flowing through it causes the shaft to spin at high speed. The turbine drives a third central propeller, adding extra power and efficiency to the propulsion system. The turbine is quieter than the reciprocating engines, producing a high-pitched hum rather than the deep rhythmic thumping of pistons. It is also more elegant in operation, with fewer moving parts, less vibration, less wear and tear. In many ways, the turbine represents the future of marine propulsion, while the reciprocating engines represent the perfected past. The engine room is staffed around the clock by teams of engineers, greasers, and electricians working in carefully coordinated shifts. The work never stops. The engines run continuously throughout the voyage, except during brief periods when the ship is maneuvering in port. Even at night, when most of the passengers are asleep, the engine room is brightly lit and fully staffed, the machinery turning with relentless precision, the propellers spinning through the dark water, pushing the ship forward at 22 knots. The engineers take pride in their work. They see themselves not as manual labourers, but as skilled professionals, the elite of the crew, the men whose expertise and dedication keep the ship safe and on schedule. They may work in oil and noise and vibration, but they work with their minds as much as their hands, solving problems, making adjustments, maintaining standards of excellence. And so the engines turn, the propellers spin, the Titanic cuts through the water, her bow slicing through the waves, her wake spreading out behind her like a white road across the sea, marking her passage across the vast emptiness of the North Atlantic. But there are still more spaces to explore, places that exist in the margins and the shadows, corridors and rooms that serve essential functions but that few people ever see or think about. These are the hidden arteries of the ship, the behind-the-scenes spaces where much of the essential work happens. Throughout the ship, hidden behind the walls of passenger areas and public rooms, runs a network of maintenance tunnels and service corridors. These narrow passageways are barely wide enough for a single person to walk through, and they are used by engineers, electricians and plumbers who need to access the pipes, wires, valves and machinery that hide within the walls. The tunnels are cramped and dark, lit only by occasional electric bulbs or by portable lamps carried by the workers. The air in these spaces is stale and warm. The walls are bare metal or exposed insulation. Pipes run along the ceilings and walls, water pipes, steam pipes, drainage pipes, each one part of the complex plumbing system that brings fresh water to every cabin, carries waste away, and distributes steam for heating. Electrical cables run through these same tunnels, thick bundles of insulated copper wire carrying electricity from the generators to every light fixture, every call button, every fan, every piece of machinery throughout the ship. The Titanic is one of the most electrically advanced ships ever built, with over 10,000 electric lights and hundreds of electric motors throughout the vessel. All of this power must be generated, distributed, and maintained, and that work happens in these hidden spaces. There are linen rooms throughout the ship, small storage spaces stocked with sheets, pillowcases, tablecloths, napkins, towels, and every other type of fabric required to serve the passengers and maintain the ship's standard of cleanliness. These rooms are meticulously organised, with shelves labelled and linen sorted by type, size and class of service. Stewards enter these rooms dozens of times each day, retrieving fresh linens for cabins, returning soiled linens for laundering. The laundry facilities themselves are located deep in the ship near the boiler rooms where waste heat can be used to help dry the washed fabrics. The laundry is a hot, steaming space where a small team of workers labours around the clock to wash, dry, and press the thousands of pieces of linen that must be cleaned each day. Large tubs filled with hot, soapy water sit on wooden stands. Workers scrub sheets and tablecloths by hand, their arms submerged to the elbows in hot water. After washing, the linens are wrung out by hand or fed through mechanical wringers, then hung on lines to dry in the warm air near the boiler rooms. Once dry, the linens are pressed using heavy electric irons heated on small coal stoves. The workers who do this pressing work are skilled in their craft, knowing exactly how to achieve crisp creases in tablecloths, smooth finishes on sheets, and perfect pleats in napkins. The work is monotonous and exhausting, but it is essential to maintaining the ship's standards. There are lamp rooms where the ship's lighting equipment is stored and maintained. Electricians work here, replacing burned-out bulbs, repairing broken fixtures, testing and maintaining the equipment that provides light to every corner of the vessel. In 1912, electric lighting is still relatively new technology, and the Titanic's electrical system represents a significant investment and achievement. The lamp rooms are workshops filled with spare bulbs, wire, tools and testing equipment. There are countless storage rooms throughout the ship, each one dedicated to specific supplies: cleaning materials, maintenance supplies, spare parts for machinery, workshop tools, medical supplies, life jackets, signal flags, navigation equipment, ropes and cables. Everything needed to maintain and operate the ship is stored somewhere in these hidden spaces, carefully inventoried and accessible to the crew members who need them. And there are workshops where skilled craftsmen, carpenters, electricians, plumbers, machinists can fabricate parts, make repairs, and maintain equipment. These workshops are small but well equipped, with workbenches, vises, hand tools, and some small machine tools. When something breaks, and things break constantly on a ship this complex, these workshops are where repairs are made, where broken parts are rebuilt or replaced, where the ship's systems are kept functioning. All of these hidden spaces, all of these behind-the-scenes areas, form an invisible support structure that makes the visible ship possible. The passengers see gleaming dining saloons, comfortable cabins, elegant public rooms. They do not see the tunnels and workshops and storage rooms. They do not see the workers who labour in these spaces. But without this hidden infrastructure, without this invisible workforce, the ship could not function. The Titanic is like an iceberg. The portion visible above the surface is impressive and beautiful, but the larger portion lies hidden below, unseen but absolutely essential to the whole. And now, imagine the Titanic at night, when darkness has fallen over the North Atlantic and the ship becomes an island of light floating through an ocean of shadow. The sun has set hours ago, disappearing below the western horizon in shades of orange and purple. The sky has faded from blue to grey to black, and now it is filled with more stars than most people have ever seen. Uncountable points of light scattered across the heavens like diamond dust. The moon has not yet risen, or perhaps it has already set. The night is dark, absolutely dark. The darkness of the open ocean where there are no city lights, no landmarks, nothing but water and sky meeting at an invisible horizon. But the Titanic herself glows against this darkness. Hundreds of electric lights shine from her portholes, casting golden reflections on the water. The lights from the public rooms on A and B decks create bright rectangular patterns. The promenade decks are lit by overhead lights that allow passengers to walk safely even after dark. The navigation lights, green on the starboard side, red on the port side, white on the masts, burn brightly, announcing the ship's presence and direction to any other vessel that might be nearby. On the upper decks, a few hardy first-class passengers still walk the promenades, wrapped in heavy coats and scarves against the cold night air. The temperature has been dropping throughout the day, and now it is near freezing. Their breath is visible in small clouds. They speak in quiet voices, not wanting to break the spell of the night. Some have come out to look at the stars, which are spectacular tonight, so numerous and bright that the Milky Way is clearly visible as a river of light across the sky. Others simply wanted fresh air before retiring to their cabins. In the first-class smoking room, a refuge reserved for men, small groups sit in leather chairs around low tables, sipping brandy and whiskey, smoking cigars and playing cards. The room is panelled in dark wood and decorated in Georgian style, masculine and comfortable. A fire glows in the fireplace, electric like the one in the B-deck suite, but convincing in its imitation. The conversation is quiet and desultory, touching on business, politics, the voyage, plans for New York. Some of the men will stay here until midnight or beyond, reluctant to end their evening. In the first-class lounges, women sit in comfortable chairs, drinking tea or sherry, talking in small groups or reading books selected from the ship's library. Some are writing letters or postcards to be mailed upon arrival in New York. The atmosphere is refined and genteel, the lighting warm and flattering. Stewards move quietly through the room, refreshing drinks, stoking the fires, ensuring that every need is met without being asked. In the second-class dining saloon and lounges, the atmosphere is similar, but perhaps slightly more relaxed, slightly less formal. Families sit together. Children who were energetic during the day are now growing tired, yawning, leaning against their parents. Conversations are quiet. Some passengers have already retired to their cabins. Others linger, enjoying these last hours of the day. In the third-class general room, the atmosphere is still lively, though the energy is beginning to fade. The fiddle player is still performing, but the tunes are slower now, more melancholy. A few couples still dance, but their movements are less energetic than earlier. Children have been put to bed in the cramped cabins, their small faces peaceful in sleep despite the lack of comfort. Older passengers sit at the tables, talking in low voices, sharing memories of home, speculating about America. Below decks, the crew continues their endless work. Stewards walk the long corridors, responding to call bells, delivering late-night requests for tea or extra blankets. In the galleys, the night staff is preparing for tomorrow's breakfast, mixing dough for bread, preparing ingredients, cleaning equipment from dinner service. Bakers will work through the night to ensure fresh bread is available in the morning. In the boiler rooms, the firemen continue to shovel coal, their shifts rotating every 4 hours, the fires never stopping. New crews relieve exhausted ones, and the work continues without pause. The heat is just as intense at midnight as it is at noon. The noise is just as deafening. The labour is just as brutal. In the engine room, engineers monitor their gauges and make their rounds, checking temperatures, listening to the machinery for any change in sound that might indicate a developing problem. The engines turn with steady rhythm. The ship maintains her speed, 22 knots through water that is calm and smooth as glass. On the bridge, the officers stand watch, their eyes scanning the horizon ahead. The ship is following her planned route. The course has been plotted and followed by dozens of ships before her. The night is exceptionally dark, no moon, no clouds to reflect any light. The sea is calm, unnaturally calm, without even small waves to create phosphorescent breaks in the darkness. The temperature has been dropping all evening, and ice warnings have been received throughout the day from other ships in the area. But ice is not uncommon in these waters in April. The warnings have been noted, but there is no alarm, no significant concern. In the crow's nest high above the forecastle, 2 lookouts, Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee, stand watch, peering into the darkness ahead. They have been instructed to watch for ice, to be especially vigilant, but they have no binoculars. The binoculars that should have been in the crow's nest were locked in a cabinet to which no one can find the key. So they watch with their eyes alone, straining to see into the darkness, looking for any sign of ice, the white shape of an iceberg, the faint line of breaking water around its base. The ship is quiet now, settling into the rhythm of night. Most passengers are asleep or preparing for sleep. The day has been pleasant and uneventful. Tomorrow they will be one day closer to New York, one day closer to arrival, and whatever awaits them there. Everything is as it should be. The ship is steady, the sea is calm, the engines are running smoothly, the crew is vigilant, and so the hours pass. The ship moves forward through the darkness, steady and sure, carving a path through the cold, still water. The stars wheel slowly overhead, marking the passage of time. The distance to New York decreases with every turn of the propellers. It is April 14th, 1912. It is late evening, approaching midnight. In a few hours everything will change, but for now, for these last moments of innocence, the Titanic continues on, a glowing island of light and life moving through the vast darkness of the Atlantic, carrying within her hull 2,200 people, each one lost in their own thoughts and dreams, each one unaware of what is coming, each one simply living their life moment by moment. The ship is at peace, the ocean is calm, the night is clear, everything is beautiful. Today, more than a century after she sank beneath the waves, the Titanic rests on the ocean floor 2.5 miles beneath the surface, broken into 2 main sections with a debris field spreading between them for hundreds of yards. Her grand staircase has collapsed, its carved oak rotted away or buried beneath fallen steel. Her decks are strewn with rust and twisted metal. Her funnels have fallen, her masts have broken. Her once gleaming hull is covered in rust and being slowly consumed by bacteria that eat iron. But in memory, in history, in the countless retellings of her story, she still lives. We remember the ship not as she ended, but as she was, a floating palace, a marvel of engineering, a symbol of human ambition and hope, and the hubris that sometimes accompanies them. We remember the people who walked her decks in those brief 4 days of her maiden voyage, the millionaires and the immigrants, the officers and the crew, the musicians who played until the very end, the wireless operators who sent distress calls into the night, the stewards who helped passengers into lifeboats, the engineers who stayed at their post to keep the lights burning and the pumps running as long as possible. We remember their stories, their dreams, their courage, their last moments. The Titanic was more than a ship. She was a world, a microcosm of society, layered and complex, filled with beauty and hardship, luxury and labour, joy and sorrow, hope and tragedy. She carried within her steel walls the full spectrum of human experience, from the heights of wealth and privilege to the depths of poverty and struggle. Every deck told a story. Every room held memories. Every corridor echoed with footsteps that are now silent. The grand staircase where elegant couples descended to dinner. The third-class general room where families danced to fiddle music. The boiler rooms where men shoveled coal in infernal heat. The wireless cabin where operators sent messages across the void. The bridge where officers scanned the dark horizon. The crow's nest where lookouts strained their eyes searching for danger. All of these spaces, all of these stories are gone now, dissolved into the cold darkness of the deep ocean. But they live on in memory, in photographs, in artifacts recovered from the wreck, in the stories passed down from survivors, in the books and films and documentaries that keep the Titanic's memory alive. She was a ship. She was a dream. She was a tragedy. She was a lesson about the limits of human control, about the power of nature, about the importance of humility, about the value of every human life regardless of wealth or class. And though she now rests in silence and shadow, though her steel is slowly returning to the ocean, though someday there will be nothing left but rust and memory, she remains alive in our collective imagination. We can still walk her decks, still hear the echo of music from her lounges, still feel the warmth of her lights, still sense the hopes and dreams of the people who sailed aboard her. The Titanic lives in memory, and memory, unlike steel, does not rust. Memory does not decay. Memory endures as long as there are people to remember, to tell the stories, to keep alive the lessons learned from tragedy. She was the ship of dreams. She was the ship that could not sink. She was the ship that sank anyway, taking with her 1,500 souls and leaving behind a legacy that transcends her brief existence. Close your eyes now. Let the images fade. Let the voices grow quiet. Let the ship return to its resting place in the darkness of the deep Atlantic. The tour is over. The journey through memory is complete. But the echoes of history remain. The lessons persist. The stories endure. Remember the Titanic. Remember her beauty. Remember her tragedy. Remember the people who sailed aboard her. Not as statistics, not as nameless victims, but as human beings who lived and loved and dreamed and hoped. And when you open your eyes again, perhaps you will see the world a little differently, with a deeper appreciation for the fragility of human ambition, the importance of humility, and the precious, irreplaceable value of every human life. Good night.